Hare Krishna, my friends. Welcome to Bhaktiville. Most every Friday night in Bhaktiville, you'll find us here reading Srimad Bhagavatam at this time. What we've read so far, there are 6 questions asked by the sages, and Srimad Bhagavatam sets out to answer them. There seem to be varying opinions on where the specific answers are to these initial questions, but so far, the 2 questions we've been reading about, or the answers to the 2 questions we've been reading about, are question 1, what is the ultimate good? And the answer to that is to attain loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. And the question number 2 is, how do the scriptures direct us in self-realization? So this will be answered tonight, and more details will continue in answering those 2 questions for the next couple of readings. Tonight we're on Chapter 2, Text 8, page 114 of the PDF, or 93 of the book. So before we get going, let's chant those 4 verses that we have up there on the board, and then offer pranams to Srila Prabhupada and to each other. So and we can sing them together. You don't have to wait for me. Just sing it with me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. O my Lord, the all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasvatim vyasam to jayam udirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayana, unto Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Shinvatam svakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana vidyantasto yabhadrani vidunoti suhrit satam. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, the super soul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee, who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. And the last one. Nashta prayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering a service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Alright, so before we get going here, let's offer our obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namane. I offer my respectful obeisances unto His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is very dear to Lord Krishna, having taken shelter at his lotus feet. And pranams to all the devotees, Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha, Kripasindhu Vacha, Patitanam Bhavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. I also offer my respectful obeisances unto the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees and can fulfill the desires of everyone. They are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Jai. So, Bhakti Mimulus, good to see you. Bradley, always good to see you. I mean, it's always good to see Bhakti Mimulus, but Bradley, I don't see you as often, so it's especially nice to see you. Thanks. Bhakti writes you too in the chat. All right, so page 114 of the PDF, or excuse me, page 93 of the book. Hang on, I got a cough. Sorry. All right, so I will say a couple of words and you can repeat them, and eventually we'll get around to chanting the whole verse in Sanskrit. Dharmaha Svanushtita Dharma Svanutishtata Pumsam Dharma Svanushtita Pumsam Vishvaksena Katasuya Vishvaksena Katasuya. Sorry, I don't know what happened to my voice. Okay, third line. Note padayed yatiratim. Note padayed yadiratim. Shama evahi. Shama evahi. Kevalam. Shama evahi kevalam. All right, let's do the whole thing. We'll do it in unison. Dharma Svanushtita Pumsam Vishvaksena Kata Suyaha Notpadayadya Diratim Shama Eva Hikevalam. Word for word. Dharmaha, occupation. Svanushtitaha, executed in terms of one's own position. Pumsam, of humankind. Vishvaksena, personality of Godhead, the plenary portion. Katasu, in the message of Yaha, what is, na, not. Utpadayat, does not, or does produce. Yadi, if. Ratim, attraction. Shramaha, useless labor. Eva, only. He, certainly. Kevalam, entirely. My messages are going kooky there. All right, translation. So just as an aside, so Sutta Goswami is now elaborating those answers to the first and second questions. So more details. Translation. Duties, dharma, executed by men, regardless of occupation, are only so much useless labor. They do not provoke attraction for the message of the Supreme Lord. Report. There are different occupational activities in terms of man's different conceptions of life. To the gross materialist who cannot see anything beyond the gross material body, there is nothing beyond the senses. Therefore, his occupational activities are limited to concentrated and extended selfishness. Concentrated selfishness centers around the personal body. This is generally seen amongst the lower animals. Extended selfishness is manifested in human society and centers around the family, society, community, nation, and world with a view to gross bodily comfort. Above these gross materialists are the mental speculators, who hover aloft in the mental spheres, and their occupational duties invoke making poetry, philosophy, or propagating some ism with the same aim of selfishness, limited to the body and the mind. But above the body and mind is the dormant spirit soul. That's you, whose absence from the body makes the whole range of bodily and mental selfishness completely null and void. But less intelligent people have no information of the needs of the spiritual soul. Because foolish people have no information of the soul and how it is beyond the purview of the body and the mind, they are not satisfied in the performance of their occupational duties. The question of the satisfaction of the self is raised herein. The self is beyond the gross body and the subtle mind. He is the potent, active principle of the body and mind. Without knowing the need of the dormant soul, one cannot be happy simply with emolument of the body and mind, the payment. The body and the mind are but superfluous outer coverings of the spirit soul. The spirit soul's needs must be fulfilled. Simply by cleansing the cage of the bird, one does not satisfy the bird. One must actually know the needs of the bird itself. The need of the spirit soul is that he wants to get out of the limited sphere of material bondage and fulfill his desire for complete freedom. He wants to get out of the covered walls of the greater universe. He wants to see the free light and the spirit. That complete freedom is achieved when he meets the complete spirit, the personality of Godhead. There is a dormant affection for God within everyone. Spiritual existence is manifested through the gross body and mind in the form of perverted affection for gross and subtle matter. Therefore, we have to engage ourselves in occupational engagements that will evoke our divine consciousness. This is possible only by hearing and chanting the divine activities of the Lord. And any occupational activity which does not help one to achieve attachment for hearing and chanting the transcendental message of Godhead is said herein to be simply a waste of time. This is because other occupational duties, whatever ism they may belong to, cannot give liberation to the soul. Even the activities of the salvationists are considered to be useless because of their failure to pick up the fountainhead of all liberties. The gross materialist can practically see that his material gain is limited only to time and space, either in this world or the other. Even if he goes up to Svargaloka, very high heavenly planet, he will find no permanent abode for his hankering soul. The hankering soul must be satisfied by the perfect scientific process, perfect devotional service. Comments. Let's see. Dr. Mimulus says, Prabhupada knew more English vocabulary than me. Yes, I know. Emolument? I don't think I've ever used that word in a sentence. I had to look it up. But, he was was educated at a Scottish college in the early 1900s where they used all that kind of vocabulary. All right, text 9. So I'll say the words, you can repeat them. Dharmasya hyapavargyasya Dharmasya hyapavargyasya Narto, well, these are all really long words. Ritayo pakalpate Narto ritayo pakalpate Nartasya Dharmaikantasya Nartasya Dharmaikantasya Amo Labaya Ismritaha. All right, let's do the whole verse. Dharmasya hyaparvagasya Narto ritayo pakalpate Nartasya dharmaikantasya Amo labhaya ismritaha. Sorry, my voice is really not so good. Anyway, word for word. Dharmasya, occupational engagement. Certainly. Apavargasya, ultimate liberation. Not. Artaha, end. Artaya, for material gain. Upakalpate is meant for. Neither. Artasya, of material gain. Dharma eka antasya, for one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service. Kamaha, sense gratification. Labhaya, attainment of. Certainly, or exactly. Smritaha is described by the great sages. Translation. All occupational engagements, dharmas, are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service, dharma, should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. Oh, Kandita is here. Hare Krishna, Kandita. Purport. We have already discussed that pure devotional service of the Lord is automatically followed by perfect knowledge and detachment from material existence. But there are others who consider that all kinds of different occupational engagements, including those of religion, are meant for material gain. The general tendency of any ordinary man in any part of the world is to gain some material profit in exchange for religious or any other occupational service. Even in the Vedic literature, for all sorts of religious performances, an allurement of material gain is offered, and most people are attracted by such allurement or blessings of religiosity. Why are so-called men of religion allured by material gain? Because material gain can enable one to fulfill desires, which in turn satisfy sense gratification. This cycle of occupational engagements includes so-called religiosity, followed by material gain, and material gain followed by fulfillment of desires. Sense gratification is the general way for all sorts of fully occupied men. But in the statement of Sukha Goswami, as per the verdict of Srimad Bhagavatam, this is nullified by the present sloka. One should not engage himself in any sort of occupational service for material gain only, nor should material gain be used for sense gratification. How material gain should be utilized is described as follows. I'm going to stop for a second and take some water. All right, we'll see if that helps. All right, text 10. Kamasya Nendriya Pritir. Kamasya Nendriya Pritir. Labo Jivita Yavata. Labo Jivita Yavata. Jivasya Tattva Jinyasa. Jivasya Tattva Jinyasa. Narto Yas Yash Jeha Karma Bihi. Narto Yash Jeha Karma Bihi. Let's sing the whole thing. Kamasya Nandriya Pritir Labo Jivitya Yavata Jivasya Tattva Jinyasa Narto Yash Jeha Karma Bihi. Boy, I'm so sorry about my voice. Word for word. Kamasya, of desires. Not. Indriya, senses, priti, satisfaction, labha, gain, jivita, self-preservation, yavata, so much so, jivasya, of the living being, tattva, absolute truth, jignasa, inquiries, na, not, artaha, end, yaha, cha iha, whatsoever else, karma bihi, by occupational activities. Translation. Life's desires should never be aimed at gratifying the senses. One should desire to live only because human life enables one to inquire about the absolute truth. This should be the goal of all works. Report. A completely bewildered material civilization is wrongly directed towards the fulfillment of desires in sense gratification. In such civilization, in all spheres of life, the ultimate end is sense gratification. In politics, social service, altruism, philanthropy, and ultimately in religion or even in salvation, the very same tint of sense gratification is ever increasingly predominant. In the political field, the leaders of men fight with one another to fulfill their personal sense gratification. Voters adore the so-called leaders only when they promise sense gratification. As soon as the voters are dissatisfied in their own sense gratification or satisfaction, they dethrone the they dethrone the leaders. The leaders almost always disappoint the voters by not satisfying their senses. The same is applicable in all other fields. No one is serious about the problems of life. Even those who are on the path of salvation desire to become one with the supreme absolute truth and desire to commit spiritual suicide for sense gratification. But the Bhagavatam says that one should not live for sense gratification. One should satisfy the senses only in so much as is required for self-preservation and not for self-gratification. Because the body is made of senses, which also require a certain amount of satisfaction, there are regulative directions for satisfaction of such senses. But the senses are not meant for unrestricted enjoyment. For example, marriage, or the combination of a man and a woman, is necessary for progeny, but it is not meant for sense enjoyment. In the absence of such voluntary restraint, excuse me, there is propaganda for family planning, but foolish men do not know that family planning is automatically executed as soon as there is a search after this absolute truth. Seekers of the absolute truth are never allured by unnecessary engagements in sense gratification, because the serious students seeking the absolute truth are always overwhelmed with the work of researching the truth. In every sphere of life, therefore, the ultimate end must be seeking after the absolute truth. And that sort of engagement will make everyone happy, because they will be less engaged in varieties of sense gratification. And what that absolute truth is explained as follows. Checking chat, pretty quiet there in chat. Text 11. Vedanti tat tattva vidas. Vedanti tat tattva vidas. Tattvam yajnanam advayam. Tattvam yajnanam advayam. Brahmiti Paramatmiti Brahmiti Paramatmiti Bhagavan iti shabdyate. Bhagavan iti shabdyate. Word for word. Padanti, they say. Tat, that. Tattvavidaha, the learned souls. Tattvam, the absolute truth. Yat, which. Jnanam, knowledge. Advayam, non-dual. Brahma, known as Brahman. Paramatma iti, known as Paramatma. Bhagavan iti, known as Bhagavan. Shabdyate, it so sounded. Translation. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. Report. The absolute truth is both subject and object, and there is no qualitative difference there. Therefore, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are qualitatively one and the same. The same substance is realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of the Upanishads, as localized Paramatma by the Hiranyagarbhas, or the yogis, and as Bhagavan by the devotees. In other words, Bhagavan, or the personality of Godhead, is the last word of the absolute truth. Paramatma is the partial representation of the personality of Godhead, and impersonal Brahman is the glowing effulgence of the personality of Godhead, just as the sun rays are to the sun god. Thus, intelligent students of either of the above schools sometimes argue in favor of their own respective realization. But those who are perfect seers of the absolute truth know well that the above three features of the one absolute truth are different perspective views seen from different angles. As it is explained in the first shloka of the first canto of the Bhagavatam, the supreme truth is self-sufficient, cognizant, and freed from the illusion of relativity. And we also know in Sri Shapanishad, a similar sentiment is expressed, that Krishna is self-sufficient, cognizant, and free from illusion. So in the relative world, the knower is different from the known. But in the absolute truth, both the knower and the known are one and the same thing. In the relative world where we are, the knower is the living spirit or superior energy, whereas the known is inert matter or inferior energy. Therefore, there is a duality of inferior and superior energy, whereas in the absolute realm, both the knower and the known are of the same superior energy. There are three kinds of energies of the supreme energetic. That's the material, the spiritual, and the marginal, right? Where the marginal material is what the world here is made of. And then, of course, spiritual is the realm where Krishna lives. There is no difference between the energy and the energetic, but there is a difference, quality of energies. The absolute realm and the living entities are of the same superior quality, but the material world is inferior quality or energy. The living being in contact with the inferior energy is illusioned, thinking he belongs to the inferior energy. Therefore, there is a sense of relativity in the material world. In the absolute, there is no such sense of difference between the knower and the known, and therefore everything there is absolute. I was going to say something about that verse, but I can't remember what it was. That's the big long pause. All right, text 12. Dita says she has 3 little birds. Oh, her chickens at home. 3 little chicks listening at home. Cool. Text 12. Touch Shraddha Dana Munayo. Touch Shraddha Dana Munayo. Yana Vairagya Yuktaya. Yana Vairagya Yuktaya. Pashyantyatmani Chatmanaha. Pashyantyatmani Chatmanaha. Sorry. Bhaktya Shuddha Taya. Bhaktya Shuddha Gritaya. All right, word for word. Oh, no, we'll sing the whole thing. Did we just sing it? I don't know if I'm getting sick or not. We're going to ignore that. Okay, word for word. Tat that. Shraddadanaha, seriously inquisitive. Munayaha, sages. Jnana, knowledge. Vairagya, detachment. Yuktaya, well equipped with. Pashyanti, see. Atmani, within himself. Cha, and Atmanam, the Paramatma. Bhaktya, in devotional service. Shruta, the Vedas. Gritaya, well received. Translation. That absolute truth is realized by this seriously inquisitive student or sage who is well equipped with the knowledge and who has become detached by rendering service and hearing Vedanta Sutra. Report. The absolute truth is realized in full by the process of devotional service to the Lord Vasudeva, or the personality of Godhead, who is the full-fledged absolute truth. Brahman is his transcendental bodily effulgence, and Paramatma is his partial representation. As such, Brahman, or Paramatma realization of the absolute truth, is but a partial realization. There are 4 different types of living beings: karmis, the jnanis, the yogis, and devotees. These are the 4 different types of people who are attracted to Krishna. The first-class transcendentalists are the devotees who have realized the Supreme Person. Second-class transcendentalists are those who have partially realized the plenary portion of the Absolute Person. And the third-class transcendentalists are those who have barely realized the spiritual focus of the Absolute Person. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literatures, the Supreme Person is realized by devotional service, which is backed by full knowledge and detachment from the material association. We have already discussed the point that devotional service is followed by the knowledge and detachment from material association. As Brahman and Paramatma realization are imperfect realizations of the absolute truth, so the means of realizing Brahman and Paramatma, i.e., the paths of jnana and yoga, are also imperfect means of realizing the absolute truth. Devotional service, which is based on the foreground of full knowledge, combined with detachment from material association, fixed up on the oral reception of the Vedanta Shruti, is only perfect method of realizing the absolute truth by the seriously inquisitive student. Devotional service is not, therefore, meant for the less intelligent class of transcendentalists. There are 3 classes of devotees, and I'll just go over that. Maybe first, second, third. So the third are the Kanishta Adhikaris, or Prakrita Bhaktas, and Prabhupada calls them temple worshippers. We only see Krishna there, no other place. The Madhyama Adhikari knows well the Lord and the Lord's devotees, the neophytes, and the non-devotees. And the first class is the Uttama Adhikari, or the Mahabhagavat, who sees everything in relation with the Lord, and the Lord present in everyone's relation. So the third class devotees, or the neophytes, have no knowledge nor are detached from the material association, but who are simply attracted by the preliminary processes of worshiping the deity in the temple, are called material devotees. Material devotees, excuse me, oh, sorry. Material devotees are more attached to material benefit than transcendental profit. Therefore, one has to make definite progress from the position of material devotional service to the second class devotional position. In the second class position, the devotee can see four principles in the devotional line, namely, personality of Godhead, his devotees, the ignorant, and the envious. One has to raise himself at least to the stage of the second class devotee, and thus become eligible to know the absolute truth. Third class devotee, therefore, has to receive the instructions of devotional service from the authoritative sources of Bhagavatam. The number one Bhagavatam is the established personality of a devotee. And the other Bhagavatam is the message of Godhead. Excuse me. The third class devotee has therefore to go to the personality of devotee in order to learn the instructions of devotional service. Such a personality of devotee is not a professional man who earns his livelihood by the business of Bhagavatam. Such a devotee must be a representative of Shukadeva Goswami, like Sutta Goswami, and must preach the cult of devotional service for the all-around benefit of all people. A neophyte devotee has very little taste for hearing from the authorities. Such a neophyte devotee makes a show of hearing from the professional man to satisfy his senses. This sort of hearing and chanting has spoiled the whole thing, and so one should be very careful about the faulty process. The holy messages of Godhead as inculcated in the Bhagavad Gita or in the Srimad Bhagavatam are unconditionally transcendental subjects. But even though they are so, such transcendental matters are not to be received from the professional man who spoils them like the serpent spoils the milk touched by his tongue. A sincere devotee must therefore be prepared to hear the Vedic literatures like the Upanishads, Vedanta, and other literatures left by the previous authorities or Goswamis for the benefit of his progress. Without hearing such literatures, one cannot make actual progress, and without hearing and following the instructions, the show of devotional service becomes worthless, and therefore a sort of disturbance in the path of devotional service. Unless, therefore, devotional service is established on the principles of Shruti, Smriti, Purana, or Pancharatra authorities, the make show of devotional service should at once be rejected. An unauthorized devotee should never be recognized as a pure devotee. By assimilation of such messages from the Vedic literatures, one can see all the personality of Godhead, all-pervading localized aspect of the personality of Godhead within his own self constantly. This is called samadhi. we'll stop there. Sorry about my raspy voice. But, so we're getting those answers to those questions. So he's talking more about what the process is now. So that's good. So we'll continue this next week. And it'll be a little while before we answer the third question, but first and second have been answered. Any questions or comments? Nope. Kandita had to leave quickly. All right, good. All right, my friends. Thank you very much for coming. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.